Hey everyone, you're listening to the Active Turnkey podcast, a podcast designed for hands-off, passive real estate rental investors. In the Active Turnkey podcast, you'll hear Tom Olson and Jared Stoutmeister discuss all things turnkey rentals with other turnkey providers, service providers, and rental investors. Our goal is to help you reach your financial freedom and whatever comes after that. Let's go. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Active Turnkey podcast. I'm your host, Jared Stoutmeister, and I have Tom Olson, owner of Olson Group.
I'm here today. I made it.
He did. He just made it, in fact. Can I say this? You were a little late. You had something going on.
I had something going on, yes.
And so it was a little bit later than normal, which is okay.
Which you guys don't know because we're pre-recording this.
Right. So, I mean, whether this is on time, I could have said he's on time.
Normally, I get us off on track. Jared, you have now got us off on track.
I did. I wanted to beat you to it. So we are back. And we have a different type of podcast scheduled today. Some information will be shared, but we've had different investors ask us questions, and a lot of times this is where we get some of our ideas for the podcast is from our clients. And so we've had people who, throughout the years, we've been doing turnkey properties, say, how do you make money?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think sometimes the reason why the question is asked is especially when you go into the groups of the people that are like the most wealthy. Like I was at a family office group, and it was shocking to me. Like I never felt so insignificant as when I went to this group. Really, honestly, and and it's literally like these people look at us like we're almost literally the bottom of the totem pole.
Sure.
And it was kind of humbling because like the way that they look at it is like we are literally doing all the grunt work.
Yeah.
We are the ones getting our hands dirty. We are the ones that are, getting out there, making it all happen. And, then you have this person that's just buying an investment that, I mean, the guy I was talking to that made me feel that way was looking to only buy packages of like 50 or more houses at a time. And he loves single family. This guy's actually a family office for a $1 billion family, and they own about 1,000 units over in Europe that they bought in the 50s. Wow. And and they're all paid off now, and they're like, why would we ever sell? They're going to stay in our families forever. So they asked that question because and the way he was asking it was like, how in the world do you ever make money in doing all this? If you're doing all this work, and like I was explaining to him, this is what we do, and showing him our process. And then when I actually showed him, well, this is how we make money, it made sense to him. But at the end, he still kind of, felt like, from his perspective that he had the better end of the deal. So I think there's that aspect of it. And then some people just want to I think there's three ways to look at it. Number one, what I just said. Number two, I think whenever you're doing business with anybody, I think it ought to be a rule that everybody makes money. True. So there's, and one of my friends, Quincy Long, actually says that, like, whoever you're investing in, if you're a lender, if you're doing something with somebody else, you always want to make sure that person's making money. And his reasoning really is because, like, if they're not making money, they're going to lose interest, or there's something that they're hiding. Okay? So, and then the third way to look at this, which I think is kind of the wrong way to look at this, but like, if you're looking at it like, oh, this person's just making a bunch of money, poor pitiful me, I'm just getting the rent and I get to take advantage of all the tax advantages, and I get to also have this house for a long time, and the house goes up in value, and all the other things that we that we talk about, we don't think about that. So there's those three different ways to look at it. Number one, like, you're not making enough money. Number two, like, everybody needs to make money. Or number three, like, oh, you're the one making all the money and nobody else is. So, but I think it is important to, like, just be completely transparent with you, and that's what we're going to be today. We're going to be completely transparent how we make money and what we have to do in order to make that money.
And that's actually a good perspective that I didn't think about in preparation for this. So today's podcast is how turnkey rental providers make money. And I guess that's one thing, is that all of our listeners and people who are even our clients, there's not any one of them who would not admit that they're trying to be profitable. in their own
Absolutely.
personal business.
100%.
And so I think it would be fair to say that there are people who are trying to help them get to their financial freedom should try to do the same.
Absolutely.
So that's definitely a good angle to look at it. But that's usually that is the angle that I hear, because from the sale price, hey, do you have any room on your price, stuff like that. More or less, sometimes people may even asking, they're almost asking without asking, are you ripping me off? Right. I mean, because that's what people hear. Because if you go on Facebook, you see these guys posting checks. You know, they made $50,000 or they made $30,000, they made $20,000, and who knows. But
I can tell you, I know at least 50 turnkey providers around the country, and they're not making anywhere close to that.
Right.
When the dust really settles, if you want to look at gross profit, that's one thing. If you want to look at net profit, really they're only making a couple $1,000s on a house. If they took everything into account, gross profit, maybe most guys that I'm talking to are making somewhere between $7,000 and $12,000 on an average turnkey deal. And I think the thing is like they're taking a lot of the risk when they're buying the property. It's possible that there's things that are going to go wrong with that property. It's possible you're going to have delays. It's possible you're going to have COVID. It's possible you're going to have whatever. All the unknowns are kind of there. They normally will take on debt or a lender to help them, purchase all these properties because they're doing it all at once. They'll go out and they'll do all the work to make it happen, and then at the end, like they're hoping to make somewhere in that, honestly, like $7,000 to $12,000 range. And I can tell you from experience, like that's what the real numbers are.
I think that's the way you just said it is actually a really good segue. So I'm going to kind of read a statement of kind of like what that looks like. So when discussing this topic of how turnkey providers make money, we could get into nitty gritty, like details. But ultimately, a good rental provider, they provide what the customer wants.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so
they should be.
Right. So what we do and how a good turnkey provider or what Olson Group would do is the buyer sets the expectation. They set the expectation and the provider brings that to them. Mm-hmm. So it's more or less on a platter. So the issues that come with doing a BRRRR deal from the turnkey perspective, we eliminate all that and say, here, it's done for you. Now you are paying retail, but that's more or less we're bringing you what you want. So that's kind of
that's the caveat that you get from the two different types of things. And in certain markets, we can even work with providers in the active turnkey process to do the BRRRR.
Yep.
We're just right now we're in a price point where for me personally to be able to sell that product doesn't make as much sense as it does if I'm selling a $120,000 product in a market in which there's a lot of that housing available to be able to make sure that that the owner or that the buyers of that still have enough. Because to me it's like there's a difference in percentages and then there's a difference in dollar amounts. So like 20% of 60 grand is not a whole lot of money, but 20% of 120 grand is double the amount of money. So like the way I look at it is like I really I think you have to weigh the risk of active turnkey or BRRRR method or versus turnkey. And we've even had people that when we were really pushing the active turnkey market and the active turnkey process tell us, no, I'd really rather buy turnkey.
Right.
And his reasoning was like, I get to cash flow from day one.
Right.
If you're doing an actual BRRRR yourself, like you might take you 6 months, maybe more, maybe a year at times, with different permitting issues or issues that might come up within a property to be able to actually get the rehab done, get it refinanced, and actually start cash flowing. So like that 6 months worth of cash flow is a significant amount of money. Right. So some people thought like, why is it's not worth it for me to go through all that, because what I really want is the cash flow out of it. So it really just it depends on what you're really trying to do and how you're trying to do it. But back to the topic of today's podcast is how do we make money?
Right. Well, that's a good question, because in the illustration you gave in the 20% of 60 and 20% of 120, a lot of times that is the same rehab. So all numbers are equal from that perspective. So really it makes it, getting the 120 deal generally does help us. And when it comes to the turnkey provider, making sense for the active turnkey side of things. So
if you're listening to this and you don't know what active turnkey it is basically is BRRRR, but you're doing it with a provider that's selling you the property, that's doing the rehab for you, and then going to manage for you on the back end. And it's kind of like, the way I look at it is it's active. And so there's a little bit of activity with that, and there is risk. There's extra risk that you're going to take with that, because number one, banks don't like to appraise properties on a cash out refi basis, so they will always always appraise lower. It doesn't matter. Like, I've talked to appraisers and they will tell me, well, it's not my fault. It's the way that the bank wants me. So it's really in the banks for that. And then the other thing is like all the risk that we take when we buy a property and then fix it up, you have to take on. Is if you're going to do a BRRRR method, like it's your house. So it means if there's a bad foundation and you didn't know it up front, guess who's got to pay for it? You. If there's a collapsed sewer pipe, you got to pay for it. If the roof looks really good, but then after it gets fully inspected, it looks like, oh, maybe there's 3 layers of shingles on here and it only looked like there was 2 and it has to go or something. Sometimes there's really big expenses that do occur. I'd probably say at least 10% of the time, maybe even more than 10% of the time. Sure. I'd say 50% of the time there's some extra expenses. Maybe even 80% of the time there's some extra expenses. But 50% of the time there's significant, couple thousand, 3,000 or 4,000, maybe 5,000. And then there is those percentages of times where there is $10,000, $20,000 worth of extra repairs when you're taking on that risk. But that's what we do, and that's part of the reason why we charge what we charge, and it's part of the value that I think that we bring, and that's kind of what we try to look at when we're selling a turnkey rental property.
So when we're providing this product, we're bringing it to you. We're creating the whole product to you. We bring it to you. What's important to you? So that's what we have to decide. That's how we make our money, based upon what's important or what is ultimately what the core expectation is for the investor. So what are those expectations? Those are some things we'll talk about today. So first of all, we would say a team and what all that means. And so that can mean many different things, but I would say systems. From a property management side of things, they better have some systems in place, especially when you're talking about having up to 1,000 or more units. You just can't do it the old school way and be productive anymore today. Processes. And people, these are all the common things that we've brought up many different times on here on this podcast, but you need to have that team in place. And again, when you're trying to scale, build a portfolio, that's a very difficult part of that process.
Absolutely. So like, I guess the way I look at it is I can do one of two things. Either I can go out and I can create the team, I can create the systems, I can create it's not just the team, it's also the network of vendors, contractors, realtors, title agents, wholesalers. There's a whole other marketing process just to market for. We haven't even got into marketing and how you actually get deals and all the offers you got to put in just to get one deal. I mean, we probably put in 30 offers just to get one accepted offer right now, and that just that requires going out and looking at all 30 of those houses. So like, if you really want to actually physically get in your car and go look at 30 houses, and if you physically want to build the team, and if you physically want to build the systems and then also have all the vendor relationships and then negotiate with all of the vendors for pricing and for delivery and for logistics, and then you also need to get licensed as a property manager, licensed as a general contractor. If you want to do all that, then honestly, I would tell you not to go with a turnkey provider because like that's the choice that you have to make. Like you have to make the choice. Do I want to do all the work, and do I want to end up with this property, say 10, 15, 20, maybe even 25% less, or do I want to pay that extra money and let somebody else make some money in this? And basically that's what I look at when I'm buying a turnkey rental property from another provider. I'm thinking, they're doing all the work, so that's why they're making the money. Sure. So so let's just go through what really has to happen. So first of all, there has to be marketing for a house. Okay, so this is what a turnkey provider has to do. They have to go find a house. So before they find a house, they don't just like all of a sudden just close on houses. It's just not how it works. There's a whole marketing process that has to happen. You might have to spend thousands of dollars in a marketing campaign. There is also maybe you have a realtor that might be able to help you find these houses. Then you have to go look at the houses. You have to make offers on houses, then negotiate houses, then set up with a title company and make sure that the title company is doing everything right. Make sure you have title insurance and all that stuff is being handled properly. And then you have to, for us, like I want to make sure I have a good attorney that's also kind of looking at some of this stuff. So then we also have an attorney that's involved in all that, that's just before we've bought the house. Right. Then once we buy the house, we have to get utilities turned on, which for us, most of the houses that we're buying, And most of the houses that you would buy if you went out and bought houses on your own would be houses that don't have utilities on. They're distressed. Like that's the only real way that you're going to be able to get a discount is if they're distressed property. So you're buying a distressed property. Utilities probably haven't been on for 30, 90, 60, 90 days. And you have to go get inspections. So then you have to go through that period of time, which used to take 2 weeks. Now it seems like it takes 2 months. Yeah. I don't understand. Well, especially with COVID. Don't even get me started with COVID this year. How long things like silly things like that have taken, and many times just to get utilities on requires a whole list of permits. Yep. So then you have to get licensed contractors to do all of the work, and then you finally get utilities turned on, and then now you're ready to get a scope of work done. So then you get a general contract. The easiest way would be to get a general contractor out there, get you a price. I think that in itself is even more work than it sounds, because you think you can just pick up the phone and just start calling general contractors. It doesn't work that way. Right now, contractors have investors kind of like right where they want them, because for the most part, they can go out, if they're a good contractor, they can go out in the retail market and probably make twice as much as we're willing to pay. So then you as the investor have to negotiate with them. You have to create your own price schedule. I mean, for us, we have a scoper app that has 800 of our things that we do and put in properties. We know exactly how much we're willing to pay for all those things. So like if you want to do all this stuff, we haven't even gotten the rehab yet. So if you want to do all these things, like that's how we make money. Like that's exactly what we're doing to be able to make a couple $1,000s in these deals. And really try to our absolute best to build rental portfolios for investors, and try our absolute best to be able to give them a product with the numbers that they're looking for. It's kind of funny. I mean, I'm getting all these requests. It just seems like I'm getting them daily, probably sometimes several times a day. If you see any properties that are 10 caps and with multi-units, like I'm a buyer and I'll buy every one of them. And I'm like, yeah, they just don't exist right now. Like you can think they do all you want. But what I know what we do offer, and we offer like good 8 to 10% single family. That's what that you're going to get. I'm not going to promise no 20, 30, 50, 100% returns. I think that's foolish, and I think that when people get into that, they kind of get down the wrong trail. But really, so like the provider, the way we make money is also we know where we can buy the houses and where the right place is. Like you just don't know that unless it's in your backyard. So having the right market is a whole thing and a whole topic that we probably should have several podcasts on over the lifespan of this podcast. But the actual market itself is a very important piece to this as well. And if you don't want, and a lot of times you don't want to live in those specific markets. So most of the markets around the country that I personally would buy my own rental turnkeys in, I probably wouldn't want to live in those markets. It just so happens that I feel like 10 months out of the year, I actually love living here. I feel like this is a great little spot for us. So in Northwest Indiana here. So now we've got a general contractor. You have to manage that general contractor. You got to pay the general contractor. You have to inspect the general contractor. You got to make sure that all the things, and at the very end, we do a whole punch list, which normally is like 50 or 100 items long, making sure that all these things are getting done at the very end. And then, the way we make money is then we go out and get pictures. We pay somebody to go out and take pictures of the properties. We create our own, what we think a property would perform at. And then we do all the work to be able to send out the marketing on the back end to be able to sell the property on the back end. And then on top of that, a good turnkey provider, in my opinion, is also going to have his own in-house property management company. I think it's a very important piece here. And if you're buying from somebody who's pawning you off to another property management company, be careful. There's many issues, and we don't have time to even get into all the issues that can create. But I'll tell you, out of the 50 or 60 turnkey operators that I know in this country, probably only 12 or 15 of them actually have their own property management company, and they're the ones trying to hold all that glue together for everybody. And to me, like that's the other piece. That's a really a priceless piece almost of the equation of what how we make our money, is to be able to have that piece right there with all of our groups of companies here to be able to provide the value to our investors.
Well, everything he just said for a turnkey provider, that's on one deal.
Right.
Now we need to add this consistently. And one of the concerns that investors have is providing consistent inventory. And like right now, we have several buyers who have been really aggressive, and that's their question. I mean, they're dying for deals, and these guys are buying 10 deals a year lately, and they need the deal flow. And so everything he just talked about, you need it over and over again, and that's the expectation,
Right.
which it should be. But again, that is where, again, if they're checking off these things, I think this is really important.
Yeah, it's really interesting you brought that up because like just the last several deals that we've had, I know we've had like 3 or 4 people like pouncing on them and like 3 or 4 people wanting them at the same time.
Right.
And then it's really hard because it's like you don't want to make anybody upset, but it's like in a way, there has to be that process. Like in a good turnkey provider is going to have several people that want to buy their house because you don't want. I mean, to me, like if you were in my business, you would never want to put all your eggs in one basket. Sure. Never. It's one of those golden rules. You never put all your eggs in one basket. When you're trying to sell, like you cannot have one person that has you locked in, and you're just giving everything to that one person. I've seen turnkey providers actually go under because that was one of their big problems. They had this big hedge fund that was buying 150 properties a year from them. And then as soon as that hedge fund changes, like they literally go bankrupt because like everything's built for that one person. Yeah. So for us, like I am very careful to try and give the people that come to the table first and say, we really want these deals. And normally Jared will say, hey, like I'll give you a certain amount of time to get your contract in and earnest money in. I want you to know that we don't do that just to like create a frenzy. Like I don't believe in that. Right. I know that that's what they teach in marketing school. Sure. I know that that's what they teach in sales school. But there comes a point in time when you serve so many people and you have so many people that are happy with your product and they want more of it, that's what's going to happen. So, one of my good friends, Quincy Long, says bigger's not always better, but better will always lead to bigger. So, and that's kind of like the case that you'll find. And you don't really want to buy from a property manager or buy from a turnkey provider that doesn't really have that, in my opinion, because like if you're the only buyer for that guy, maybe you should check yourself and be like, maybe I need to think about this again because it's, like, why am I the only person that would think that this is a good deal? Yeah.
I've had that happen recently in the last few months on several deals where
we've had people upset with us because other people didn't, other people got the property, but we're just kind of like, I don't know how to help with that.
Well,
but
on a recent campaign that I sent out to a turnkey list we sent out, I made sure to put in there, hey, this sold in 8 minutes. I said that on purpose and not exaggerating. That was the time. I had an email I sent it out at 5. Got the email back at 5:08. Hey, I want this house. Send me a contract. So at that point, when someone emails me saying, "Hey, I wanted this. I thought I had the chance," I'm more or less our stance has always been first come first serve. But in the end, this is just an illustration of somebody who's trying to provide volume, and it's going to take all of that and more of what just happened. And again, so like all that's happening, we're trying to add to it to try to keep up with the expectation there.
Sure, our goal up front for any of the turnkey deals is to try to make somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000. And I'm going to tell you, like, if that's your goal, and if you're in any business, I don't care what it is, if your goal is to make a certain amount of money, you know that the majority of the time you're going to make less than that. Right. There's going to be something that comes up. It's going to take a little bit longer. Something's going to just prevent you from making that money. And honestly, like if you think that that's too much money for somebody to make, then maybe you're not the right buyer for for a turnkey provider. And again, like if you think that you can go out and create all the systems, and honestly, most of you that are out there probably could. But for most of you, it's probably not the best use of your time. Right. So I always say there's 2 ways to kind of make it and 2 ways to be able to create your financial freedom. One is to be active in it, do it yourself. And that's going to take some time. Or do whatever it is that you do best and invest passively and let somebody else kind of take care of all that. One of the rules that Rockefeller made, if you read David Rockefeller Habits, was early on in their family's history, they decided to not get active in these businesses. Like whatever they're going to invest in, they decided not to be in those and not to have that family like inside the business. They decided to actually, make sure that it was an investment for them. If you look at the 4 quadrants from Kiyosaki, it's literally, having employee, self-employment, being a business owner, and investor, and they wanted most of their their investment into and it could be even into businesses, but they were an eye in that, and they were an investor in that business, not like actually being in the business. And that's really what you would be doing if you're the one that's going to go out and find the deals himself, and if you're going to look at the properties, and if you're going to manage a rehab, then absolutely you should get a better deal, and you should not, somebody else shouldn't make that extra money. But what I see happen is a lot of times guys get out and they do that themselves, and they still end up paying the same amount of money.
Sure.
And it would be better off, and they'd get the cash flow quicker if they just found a turnkey provider that was selling the properties, and then it'd be done. So I don't know if there's anything else I can add to this, Jared, unless you have some other little things. But really, I know that's not a super long podcast today. But really, that's how we make money. And I believe that we're adding a lot of value to the market, and a lot of people want what we have. So I think sometimes your customers tell you whether or not you're adding the value to the market or not, and they have told us. And I know a lot of other turnkey providers as well that are really busy right now and having a hard time. They're having a hard time getting inventory, number one, and then they're having a hard time keeping it once they actually have it. I mean, I think the other thing to think about, at least this year, and this is a little different than normal, is you might think you're buying properties at retail just because that's what a house appraises for when you buy it. Yeah. And I think for some areas that's the case. Yes, for some areas I believe that's the case. In other areas, you're probably actually buying less than retail. And just because a house appraises for that doesn't necessarily. I still don't mean that necessarily means that, because we've had to make some hard decisions even in our own company. When the market gets tight like it is right now. So the market right now is so tight. I think even in our MSA, we have less than 3 weeks of inventory. So 3 weeks of inventory is just not. A normal market is like 6 months of inventory, 3 to 6 months of inventory. And when you have less than a month of inventory, that's a buying frenzy almost as soon as something hits the market. So we personally have even moved a couple of our houses, not too many, but a couple of our houses we've moved from turnkey. So for instance, a house we would have sold for maybe $100,000. We sold it retail for $130,000. And this is only a 2-bedroom. So a 2-bedroom house that we would have sold for $100,000. That I think a lot of investors might have thought, I'm not getting that good of a deal. I think it was a little bit lower on the cash flow because it's only a 2-bedroom and they don't get as much rent for it. But maybe they would have paid $100,000 for that same house. And it would have appraised for $100,000. Sure. It also is going to appraise for $130,000 on the real retail market. So and I'm not saying that's always the case. So I don't want to set the expectation that every single time you buy from, but it is the case quite often. Sure. So I would just keep that in mind as well. And I know that doesn't really matter. The value I really don't think matters until you're ready to sell. And then what you can really get for it, because the house doesn't really know what it's worth. It's really the tenant's going to tell you what they're willing to pay for rent. So anyways, I know I got off on a tangent there, but really at the end of the day, there's a lot of work that goes into this. There's a lot of work that goes in, and a lot of risk actually. There's a lot of work and a lot of risk that all turnkey providers have to take in order to be able to provide the value and provide a cash flowing asset at the end of the process.
So Tom hit on most of these things, so I'm going to recap some of these things that the expectations the turnkey provider is supposed to have. And we talked about the team, consistent inventory. Of course, he mentioned the market, network, he already talked about contractors, attorneys, municipalities, working with cities, and so on. The product itself, as far as the types of finishes, a good turnkey provider should have a nice product that they're selling. And then lastly, even the price, the numbers itself. So in the end, if you have a turnkey provider that's able to check off every single one of those expectations you have, that provider is bringing you value. So that's one way to look at it. So at that point, if that's what you're looking for, and they're providing every single one, are you okay if ever all that is checked off? Are you okay with them making what they should make on their end of things?
Now, and I also think a really good solid turnkey provider is not going to offer a discount because they don't need to.
Sure. Yep.
And it's not really worth it to them.
Right.
at the end of the day. So, sure, most turnkey providers will offer you a referral fee. Most of them that I know will offer somewhere around $500 if you refer somebody else. So there's probably, something like that.
Right.
But as far as when you're asking for a discount, I just don't think that most turnkey providers that have been doing this for any period of time that know the risk they're taking and understand all the work that goes into it and the value that they're bringing to the marketplace is normally going to be willing to, just give a discount just because it's just really not. And I know some people, like, it's in their genes, it's in their blood. They just have to ask every single time. And I don't, and most of the people that we work with are not like that at all. We don't have, this is not like a big problem that we're trying to stamp out. It's just, I think it was just good to be transparent and let people know what it is that we do and how much money we make. I don't even care if people know how much money we're making on properties.
Right.
What we're doing for that.
So when it comes with a discount too, there's a couple of things that may come into play. First of all, we have a list of buyers who want to purchase. So if I have a buyer come and say, hey, can you do a discount? At that point, it's really hard for me to tell you, yeah, I'll give you a discount, even though I have a line of people who are ready to buy that same house at value. It just doesn't really make much sense for me to do that, even though we want to take care of you. And then the other side of it, that kind of it's closely connected, if not glued together, is that, like Tom said, in some cases, in some areas, some of these houses are actually worth more than our sale price. Like literally market value, it's worth more. We sold 2 houses in Hammond in the last couple of weeks, where one of them we sold for $129,900. It's appraised for $145,000. It appraised for higher than the sale price, and the same thing for another one in Hammond. The same thing where other comps are selling for $135,000, we're selling for $125,000. So the numbers look good for you, the investor, and so because in the end, that's what drives the deal.
We do that on purpose. A good turnkey provider is going to do that on purpose.
Yes,
because they know where those cutoff points are at. They know, what is a good deal. And all turnkey providers are not the same. I know some turnkey providers are really trying to push the cap rates down, like in the 6 and 5% ranges, and I know some turnkey providers are really, trying to, squeeze out as much as they possibly can from the deals. And I can't blame them if they actually have the buyers and if they have people that want, to be able to make that happen. But I think it's important to know who you're working with, and to just, you do want them to make money.
Yep.
And if they make money, I believe that they have the fortitude and they have the ability to be able to do things for you that you maybe wouldn't have been able to do if they didn't make money. So
one illustration I can give, and then we can shut this down. But we had a wholesaler back when we were wholesaling a while back, and he just did not like the idea of buying from a wholesaler. He was a flipper locally, and he just did not like it. He didn't like the fact that somebody else was making money on his deal, and so it took me a while. But after a while, I more or less just said, if you are buying for the price you would buy it, and the numbers are right, what difference does it make? If you're getting product and you need a product, what difference does it make as long as you're buying at the right price? And the same thing goes for the turnkey. If you're getting everything you want in that out of the deal, why do you need to pay less? If that's the case, then that person has brought you the value that you were expecting. And so ultimately that what drives the deal. And so,
absolutely. So I don't want to get into that and beat a dead horse. So that's going to do it.
I actually, that's one of my things. I'd be.
Well, stop it. That's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you guys so much for listening, and hope you guys learned something. And if this has helped you or helped your friends, I'd love for you guys to share this, give us a 5-star review on iTunes, and just let other people know about Olson Group and what we're doing here, flipping the city of Gary, Indiana. It is one of my life's passions, one of my life's goals, to be able to flip the city and to be able to bring it from a city where people were moving away from several years ago, really, like when we started this journey, to now where I'm not sure like that, the census data will probably start telling us if people are actually moving here more than they're moving away. But I do believe it's really evened off already, and I'm really excited about a lot of the new building and a lot of the new things that are kind of coming to the city of Gary.
And also, don't forget, we do build rental portfolios for investors. So if you're interested in purchasing properties, you can reach me at jared@buyolsongroup.com, or you can go to our website at buyolsongroup.com. And also, we have we're really ratcheting up our system here.
Active Turnkey. We have something for you guys. Yeah. So, we do have a quick call to action. If you guys are interested in a free copy of this book, we will email it to you. If you will just text the word turnkey, so TURNKEY, text the word turnkey to 415-528-7403. We will try to get somebody to put that in the comments below as well, but just text the word turnkey to 415-528-7403. 7403 for your copy of Active Turnkey.
Thanks, guys. Active Turnkey.
The best way to buy rentals.
Olson Group Network makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice. Unless specifically stated otherwise, Olson Group Network does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. Any third-party materials or content of any third-party site referenced in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions, standards, or policies of Olson Group Network. Olson Group Network assumes no responsibility or liability for the accuracy or completeness of the content contained in third-party materials or on third-party sites referenced in this podcast or the compliance with the applicable laws of such materials and/or links referenced herein.